Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. That's so funny. I'm looking at Vicky Hill's name, and I was actually going to mention her in a conversation Yejide and I were having before we started. Yejide Kilanko, thank you so much for coming and joining us at Junction Reads with your book, A Good Name. It was an incredible story. I am so excited to talk about it with you. But before we get started, I am going to acknowledge where I am on Turtle Island. Feel free to acknowledge the Indigenous land from which you are joining us here today, and you can put that in the chat. Junction Reads exists in Tekaronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. I am specifically in Adobakok, the place of the alders, in the Michi-Saagiig language. Both are still home to many Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. Yejide, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. Ever since I closed that last page, which we can't talk about, I have been excited to talk to you about it. Before we get started and I share your biography and we get into hearing you read from A Good Name, I was wondering if you'd like to share with everyone what you're reading right now or any recommendations for books.
Okay, so I actually have what I'm reading right now right next to me. So It's called Double Wahala, Double Trouble. So Wahala is a pidgin word. It's a Nigerian pidgin word, which means trouble. So it's really just a double trouble, double trouble.
Right.
So it's a collection of short stories. It's by Uchechukwu Peter Umezurike. So yeah, so I just got it actually. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Nice. Is it fiction?
Yes, all fiction. Okay. So he's also based in Canada, actually. He's in Alberta. Yeah. So because I'm thinking of putting together, because I also write short stories. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of putting together a short story collection. So I'm reading and getting, because I just finished some major edits. So I'm trying to kind of like take a break from writing and just reading and just relaxing before I go into that. So
into writing short stories. Have you written any?
Yes, like, so I have several. I have several written. So a couple published short stories, but I'm thinking of putting together a collection.
Nice.
And yes, so I thought I actually have a name for the collection already, because I like coming up with names before it gives, for me, it makes it concrete.
Right.
That when I have a name, it makes it like, okay, this is going to be a real thing.
And are you willing to share what the name is?
Okay, yeah, it's called No Long Thing.
Oh, okay. Because the stories are short, or
and it's also a Nigerian slang.
No long thing.
No, let's say you're in a long thing, meaning like, so just like, so it's a no long thing. So I thought it was a play. It was a play on that because they're all short stories.
Nice. I'm excited. Excited. I will look for some of the short stories that you've published already.
Yes. Okay, I will send you links. I have a few. Yeah, I have a Christmas one that I like. It's not really Christmassy, but I will send you some links.
Yeah, we'll share them. Thank you so much. Yeah, especially Christmas ones. I am one of those people who is I dive into Christmas books, Christmas stories when we're in the season.
Yeah. Okay, I will send you some.
Thank you. Before we hear you read, which I'm really excited to hear, can I share your biography with everybody?
Yes, please.
And this is derived from the Transatlantic Agency. It was on their website. Yejide Kilanko was born in Ibadan, Nigeria. Her debut novel, Daughters Who Walk This Path, is a Canadian national bestseller. The novel was longlisted for the 2016 Nigeria Literature Prize. Kilanko's work includes a novella, Chasing Butterflies, and a children's picture book, There is an Elephant in My Wardrobe. Kilanko's short fiction is in the anthology New Orleans Review 2017, The African Literary Hustle. When she's not busy dreaming about more stories and poems, you'll find Yejide online playing simultaneous games of Scrabble. She lives in Ontario, where she practices as a therapist in children's mental health.
Yeah.
Yejide,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you for this wonderful invitation. So this is a good name. So that's what I'm reading from. I'm going to be reading from chapter 26. So just to give a bit of a background about a good name, the main characters in the book are Eziafa and Zina Okereke. And Eziafa, he's a Nigerian man. They're both Nigerians who moved to the States, and they live in Houston, Texas. And Eziafa has been in the States for quite a while, but things were not going well. And so he got this brilliant idea that he was going to go back to Nigeria and marry a young woman and bring her to the States and train her as a nurse. And so she was going to be like his, like he was going to be like like he was going to start all over again. And Eziafa and Zina was going to drive that. So in this scene, Zina has now moved to the States, and Eziafa has informed her that he wants her to study nursing, which is not something she wants to do because she wants to study business. And so in this scene, Eziafa and his best friend, Felix, are having a conversation. And so Felix and Eziafa met years ago in Nigeria, they're childhood friends. Okay. Eziafa sat at an empty table under an overhead fan. Maggie, one of the regular waitresses, approached him with a big smile and a laminated menu. Mr. Eziafa, good afternoon, she said. Eziafa rested against the chair. Maggie Kitchen, how now? I'm fine, I know you wouldn't order your food until your friend arrives. I thought you would have a chance to look at our new menu. He and Felix met regularly for lunch at Bottom Pot, a popular destination for Nigerian drivers in the greater Houston area. Frequented by other Africans, it was where they all caught up with news from home. Thank you, Eziafa said. Don't tell me you people took away my fried yam. Maggie smiled. Your precious yam is still there. We couldn't undo your one-man riot. Can I get you something to drink? A bottle of malt will be fine, Eziafa said. He was halfway through his bottle when Felix walked into the restaurant. The tired look on Felix's face cleared when he looked around and saw Eziafa's waving hand. No vex, Felix said as she pulled up a chair. I ran into some traffic. I was tempted to carry my car on my head and walk. Eziafa laughed. You for try 'em now. Maggie brought a pitcher of ice water with a slice of lemons to the table. Mr. Felix, welcome, she greeted. Thank you, my sister, Felix said. Felix was still wearing his sunglasses. Take off your shades, Eziafa said. It's not sunny in here. I'm wearing them on purpose, Felix said. When we become too scared of the king, we wear a basket as a mask to tell him the truth. Eziafa snorted. You've never had a problem with telling me what I should be doing. These words have been spoken on behalf of your wife. You're now Zina's basket mouth? Felix took off his sunglasses and placed them on the table. On my way here, Zina called to ask for my help. Eziafa had an inkling of what was coming. All week, Zina had been walking around the house looking like someone died. What does she want? Zina asked me to beg you, Eziafa, she does not want to do this nursing thing. Eziafa's mouth soured. Why was Zina looking for his trouble? Who told that woman she has the right to report me to anyone? I'm your best friend, Felix said. Mr. Bestie, how many times has your wife, Nkolika, called me to intervene in your affairs? Felix gave him a pacifying look. You know, I usually mind my business when it comes to the matters between a man and his wife. But Zina was crying. Remember, when an animal has an itch, it goes to a tree to scratch his body. A human being with an itch goes to a fellow human to be scratched. He wasn't ready to listen to Felix's proverbs. Are you telling me you've been scratching my wife's body? Stop saying nonsense. Who else do you want Zina to go to? Zina's eyes produced a lot of tears. Like I told her, we didn't leave Nigeria to come here, fold our hands and watch other people prosper. The many responsibilities we have at home do not give us the liberty to indulge in frivolous pursuits. My brother, you are right about our responsibilities. Still, Nursing is a difficult profession. I'm sure there are other programs Zina can do. Tell me, is cab driving easy? Remember, we chose to drive a cab, Felix said. Eziafa shook his head. Did it truly have a choice in the matter? To him, it felt as if immigrants were allowed only into certain professions. Look at you, fine lawyer man. Tell me, would you hate sitting in an air-conditioned office where you make six figures? Several men have gone back to school to study nursing. Why don't you go back, Felix asked. You finished with a first-class degree. Doing the program will not be a problem for you. The only school Eziafa wanted to attend was the one where they taught people how to make quick money. Zina is the one with the fresh young brain, he said. She would do better than me. Felix sighed. I still remember how Obikwelu and his wife fought over her going to nursing school. It almost ended their marriage. During one of their outings, Obikwelu told Eziafa his wife Chigo made over $90,000 a year. Imagine if he had a tenth of that amount and turned it into Naira, he could do a lot from his mother. Now that Chigo is cruising around Houston in a brand new BMW, I'm sure she's grateful Obikwelu put his foot down. Believe me, things are not as rosy as they appear, Felix said. Eziafa wasn't interested in hearing Obikwelu and Chigo's story. This opportunity was his second chance to make something of himself. He had no intention of wasting it. Zina should be grateful I brought her to this country. There were many other girls. It seems like this nursing thing was your plan before you went home. I thought about it, Eziafa said. Then why didn't you choose someone who would have enjoyed nursing, Felix asked. In hindsight, you should have asked Zina to make it a search criterion. On top of their constant bickering, Zina's cantankerous nature was obscuring her beauty. Felix, I'm tired. I'm tired of always counting my pennies, of wondering how I can reinvent myself. Once Zina finishes school and gets a good job, I will finally have enough. Felix's expression became pensive. At whose expense? My brother, I've come to realize we all have to figure out what is enough and what we're willing to exchange for it. And it has nothing to do with living amid want or plenty. Are you done talking? Eziafa asked. Felix gave me an annoyed look. Yes. Thank you. Let me decide what is best for my family. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
That, Eziafa, I think, is where I want to start. I want to talk. I had a couple of other questions, but I feel like since you read that excerpt, I want to talk about him. He is such a complicated character, and yet it doesn't matter in the end. And he becomes a character despite his behavior and his language and how he treats other people and how he's self-centered and deluded and all of these negative things. There is still this really, I don't admire him, but I just feel for him. And I feel, I just like him so much. I want to talk to you about how the challenges in writing that because that is a challenging thing to do, to create a character so not nice, so self-centered, and yet to have the reader still love him as much as I do.
Because I think that came from when I wrote my very first novel, Daughters Walk This Path, and the antagonist in that book, a lot of people did not like him. Like he was just like, it was like bad, and people weren't able to see like any redeeming side to him. And so I said when I was going to write my second book that I was going to have to create a more nuanced character, like in terms of like how we're not all bad. We're not all good, and we all have different sides to us. And I think in hindsight, because it took me a long time from the time I would say conception of this book to publication, it took 11 years.
Wow.
And so I think during the process of it, so there were many drafts. And so there were many people who weighed in, who read it and gave me feedback. And so I'm so thankful that, because I didn't want to create a character that was just, I wanted him to, that, when you wouldn't approve of his decisions or his actions, but a part of you may be able to see why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also comes from my working as a therapist, as in, I always say every behavior is serving a function,
Mm-hmm.
whether we agree with it or not, right? So there's that when a child, I work primarily with children, act in a particular way, there's a reason behind it.
Yeah, it's
And
coming from somewhere.
Yeah, and once we understand what that reason is,
Mm-hmm.
then it can give like, okay, this is where they're coming from, and this is how
Right.
I can intervene.
Yeah.
So that was where I was hoping to achieve, that even if you didn't agree with his, his actions, with his beliefs, that it would make sense,
Mm-hmm.
given his own circumstances, given the world that he was from,
Right.
given all the influences in his life, that those
Yeah.
actions will make sense in that context.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the most important aspects of the novel. I think almost a character in and of itself is that cultural expectation, the family loyalty, family expectations, the grief he's feeling, not having his father. And that I think you crafted the novel very well with that being its own character, right? Almost not like a nemesis for Eziafa, but this weight that he carried around with him.
Yes.
How was that?
And I think, well, for me, like, I'm an immigrant too, right? And with those expectations from home,
Mm-hmm.
and they do follow you, right? They do follow you, and a part of you understands, and then a part of you is resentful in some cases, right? And it's not peculiar to me, or only like, like even when we get together and everybody has different, and so it's being able to navigate that. You're navigating a new life with a new way of being, with new expectations, but you're still tied home too, right? You still have those ties at home, and what those expectations, and the people, they didn't come with you. So they haven't done the changing or the growing up that you've done, right? So it's like, okay, you're now kind of straddling between two. So they have their own expected way of doing it, and then you're here now, and they say, oh, you've changed. But you used to think this way. Well, I think, of course, you should change.
Right.
When you go through a different experience, you move to a new place, different way of being. I think it's just normal that you change. Mm-hmm. And so it's that push and pull of trying to set up boundaries in places where before there were no boundaries.
Right. Yeah. And I feel that with Eziafa, and I loved that you started the novel with him. Yeah. And the plotting, I feel, and the characterizations were in line with each other throughout, right? Like there's a slow pace to the novel, but in a good way. I know people think that slow pacing is a negative thing. It's not. I love that, because there is, along with that pacing, we get to see Eziafa, this filled with hopes and dreams and everything that's happening. And then as he slowly unfolds and opens up and shows himself more clearly to the reader, to Zina, to Felix, to everyone else, it was just paced well. And I wanted to know, as a writer, as a reader, how did you think about that? Did you think about plotting and character and have those side by side throughout, or did the telling of Eziafa's story just naturally?
I think it was a mix, because I do write with an outline. Mm-hmm. My very first time when I wrote, I didn't write with one. So I was just writing out, it came to me. And then I had to go back after and kind of like rebuild everything. And it's almost like you're building a house and you don't have plans. Yeah. And so the kitchen is above, I don't know, the garage. And Yeah, the laundry room is under it, like, everything's all over the place.
Right.
So now I've learned how to, to that it gives structure for me that way. And so I do write with and the way I plot I do my outlines, it's almost I do chapters and I break each chapters into scenes.
Oh, wow.
Because years ago I used to do some theater acting. So it's almost like a play script.
Right.
Yeah, so it's almost like a play script, like who's saying what, who's like doing the settings, what's the setting like, and so that has helped me in terms of giving me a sense of, okay, this is where you're going with this. Right. And then as a story, as I'm writing, and then the characters, they do have a mind of their own, and then they say, well, sorry, I don't want to be boxed in there, I want to do this instead. So I'm flexible in the way that I can move things around. Right. And so I think having an outline and having a sense of where I'm going and having a sense of the character arcs and the plotting, I think that's what helps me, because I do come almost like a three, like an arc story. So you have the beginning, and then the character goes into the store and the door slams behind them, and then it goes around the door, slams behind them. That's it. Now it's just this urgency, and it just goes to the end. Right. And so I think having that system for me works, because I when I'm writing, I go back to my outline. Yeah. And I look, okay, oh, do I need to move this? Do I need to move the scene here? In the writing, the characters revealed something else. Oh, okay. How does this impact what I already had before? So yeah, so so that structure has been very helpful for me in keeping things straight, especially if I write, I don't write one thing at a time. I write multiple things. Oh, wow. Because the way my brain works, I need to do, I think I always say I think I would be like ADD, ADHD. So I need to do different things. And especially when I feel stuck in one thing I'm writing, I jump. So because I write poetry, I write short stories, I write flash stories, I write children's stories, I write adult novels. So if I'm writing something and it's not working, I jump to something else. And so, so that's how I kind of manage that. And sometimes, especially in the last, I would say maybe 3 years, I've really loved to write flash because I can start and finish it. Yeah. And it gives me that immediate sense of, just closure, it's done. Yeah. And then I can go back. I can go back to the long ones that are taking time. And, in the beginning, when A Good Name started, I actually started in 2010. I was still editing my very first novel. It wasn't published yet. And it started as, this manuscript. Eventually, that manuscript was divided into 3 books. And A Good Name is the second book from that manuscript. Wow. So my novel that I just finished edits on is the 3rd book from that manuscript. Wow. And so when you structured, when you outlined A Good Name, was it part of a bigger outline? Like, did you have? Yes. So the very first manuscript that it came from was called When Land Spirits Cross Big Waters. And it was a story about 2 couples. So that's the umbrella name of right? Yes. Yeah, it was called When Land Spirit Crossed Big Waters. And then it was just a really big manuscript. It was about over 100,000 words. And it was just a lot. Yeah. And so that took me from 2010, 2014 to write. And then that was in the middle of that, I published Daughters. And then I went for a book festival in Nigeria, and then I said, you know what, I needed to break it up. So I broke it up into 3 books. And so my second book, Chasing Butterflies, a novella, was the second one. Right. And it was the first book. It was the first one. So one of the couples went into that. And then A Good Name was the second couple from When Land Spirits Cross Big Waters. And then my 3rd book that I just finished the major edits for, In Our Own Ways, I took one of the characters and I created a whole new character. Right. But there were parts of that book that was also from that manuscript. So so it's been and now I'm pushing when you're shopping books around, and you're getting no's and no's, and but now I'm grateful that I got a no. I got those no's because it was more than one. There were lots because I think it gave yeah, it gave me time. It gave time for the book to kind of simmer.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's
to
yeah,
simmer. So
I hear that a lot
yeah,
from people in putting your everything into a novel and wanting it to be seen immediately, but that it's sometimes better just to have it sitting there
yes,
for a
and
bit.
and I grew with it.
Yeah,
Right, in a way that I also grew with it as a writer.
yeah.
And because I believe I'm still learning. I believe I'm still learning. I don't think I've arrived. Like I don't know. I always feel like anything I'm doing that I'm a lifelong learner.
Oh yeah,
That is
yeah.
all.
Well, you would
So
hope that
yes,
we aspire to continue to be influenced, whether positively or negatively,
yeah,
by the other work that we're reading and the other
yes,
um, experiences that we have.
yeah. So
The
yeah,
the characters, speaking of characters moving around your work, your fiction, the secondary characters in A Good Name were perfect. I love Felix and his groundedness and his evolution, I guess, that happened a little quicker than Eziafa and Billy Lou, even though she doesn't appear very much, is an important character. And Raven, and there's just so many great characters that all act, or each act as, beacons of hope. And um, maybe as a reader you think, oh, this is going to be the person who's going to help, but they also act as warnings. And I wanted to talk to you about how you developed each one of those characters, because they're so, even Raven, even though he's not, a major mover and shaker in the novel, he does some big stuff, and he exists so completely drawn out. And I wanted to know, in creating all of these character arcs, did they each get their own, very big life behind them before they entered the book?
I think of Raven's character came from a conversation I had with someone I met at church. And so Raven, for those who haven't read the book, he's an ex-Mennonite tomboy, and who is now a nurse.
Mhm.
And we're having this conversation one day, and she was ex-Mennonite, and she told me about her cousin who was shunned. A female cousin was shunned because she married a Black man.
Mhm.
And so like, and so I sat with that. And so when I was thinking, okay, I need to create Raven's character, I remember that story.
Right.
I remember that real life story. And I said, okay, so instead of course the cousin who was just, I once had a cousin. So I'm like, okay, so I once had a cousin. I'm like, the cousin didn't die, but as far as everybody was concerned, it was once.
Right.
They're gone because they
Yeah.
made that choice. And so I wanted to create a character who had their own story, because so that Zina, because it was almost like going against both of them in some way, went
Mhm.
against the traditional expectations for them.
Yeah.
And it's like finding your own person who understands that.
Yeah.
And
I love their relationship.
yeah,
I mean, at times shocking, because as a reader, I'm just sitting back and reading the book and going, no, don't do it. This isn't going to end well. This isn't going to, there's too many people with unrequited love out there.
yeah.
But their relationship is so beautiful and so intense. I thoroughly enjoyed watching them exist on the page. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then I'll open it up. Sorry, but I feel like I'm monopolizing your time. If there are questions from anyone else, feel free, put them in the chat and Kaylee will ask on your behalf. I just want to talk about the house that Eziafa, I can't even say that it's the house that Eziafa built, because he didn't.
Yeah.
I want to know where like gold bathroom tiles on the outside of the house. I feel like that when I read it, I thought this house has to exist somewhere. You must have driven by this house and thought that's
Yeah,
Eziafa's house.
I did see a house. It didn't have gold, but it did have bathroom tiles.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. I was like, this was years and years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I always remembered it. And so when I was like, when I'm going to, and I've had another conversation with someone whose house who was building a house, they were living in the States, and family member were building a house for them in Nigeria. And they actually put bathroom tiles in the living room just to make it all pretty. And so when I remember that, I'm like, yes, this has to go into the story. So there are houses out there with bathroom towels on
Oh
them.
my gosh. Yeah. It was so heartbreaking because it was like this dream being built for him. I mean, of course I laughed when I read the description of it at the end, but I just felt, oh no. But yeah, that was so good. When
I don't know. I can see a question from Frances.
Oh, you do?
Yes. So hey, hello. She had an applause first.
Yeah, Kaylee, sorry. I'll stop now and I'll hand it over to you.
That's okay. I was like, we are willing to let you go. We don't have a lot of questions today, so we have a little bit more time to explore. But Frances does have a question, and Frances asks, dividing a large manuscript into several parts is a fascinating process. Do you consider the resulting 3 books to be a series or as freestanding books?
Okay. So they're not a series. So the first one was a novella which was published in 2015, and A Good Name, published this year, is the second part. And then the third part is the one I just finished the major edits for. So I'm keeping everything crossed, eyelashes, fingers crossed that I get good news in the new year. So I would say they're all stories about couples. So at the heart of it is relationships. So I think it's the themes that kind of that weaves through them, but they can really stand alone on their own. So what would be central is their relationships with Nigerian couples. So it's different aspects of, and they're all, Chasing Butterflies is set in Maryland. And so the immigrant couple, A Good Name, is set in Houston. But the third book is set entirely in Nigeria. So yeah, so it's very different. But I would say so. Yeah, so that was how and of course I divided it with 100 and something, and then I added to it. Mm-hmm. But I loved. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, what makes you into writing about couples?
You're so good. I'm like, I don't even think
you know why? I think it's because. So I do counseling. I've been doing counseling online.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm used to looking at stuff at the side. And that's why.
That's good. I'll call you if ever Kaylee calls in sick. I'll call you.
Yeah. So okay. So Emmy had a question. What made you writing about couples? I think the very first idea. So I always say that A Good Name is almost like a pulled from the headlines story, because I decided to write that story in 2010 because there were so many stories in the news about Nigerian nurses being killed in the US by their husbands. Right. And the way that I process life is I write. And I'm like, okay, it is something that I want to know more of, things that I'm puzzled about, something that, I need to just walk through for myself. And so that was why, and then of course, because the manuscript grew so big, then I had to just break it down. But I think what I'm interested in is human beings, how they think, what's behind an action. And I think that comes from being a therapist part, where you're trying to so it's how human beings function, how they think, what gives their life meaning. Yeah, so I think that's really, but it's easy to explore that within the context of a relationship, because of all the interactions. So I think that's why.
Yeah, it's important. It's important too, because I felt like in reading this, there's the media, not the media, but the arts, I guess, movies, TV, and literature to a certain degree. There seems to be this trope that exists about the romantic side of arranged marriage, right? Like, I don't know how many stories we've got where, an arranged marriage happens and we see that, this love blossom out of a surprising setup. But I thought this was great in seeing an arranged marriage unfold in a not, hateful way. It's not like there was hate or disgust or anything, but it just unfolded slowly and more honestly, I think.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
another question from Vicky. Said, have you always combined writing and your profession, or did you begin writing later? Okay, so no apologies. Yeah, so I'm hoping that after today you're going to read it. So she also said she hadn't read A Good Name yet. So I started writing when I was 12. I would say writing poetry. That was the first thing I did, because I was in boarding school, and I'm a very emotional person. I always have all these big emotions. I know what to do with them, and so I started writing, and that was just my way of processing it. And so wrote through till 2009 was when I started working in social work, in child protection. And I had to, investigate child abuse, child sexual abuse. And so that was what led to my very first book. That's what My Daughter's Walkless Path is about. But I said it in Nigeria. And so that was my way of walking through that. And so, writing came first, social work came second.
Right.
But I think because they're both big parts of my life. So they inform, both of them inform. I'm always writing every day, whether you're writing case notes or you're writing reports, or you're writing something. You're writing somebody else's, especially if you're doing, a session, you're writing down things. So so they kind of inform each other, but writing came first.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're writing, writing in general is about human beings, reacting and living in a world, but especially if you are particularly interested in examining humans and how they behave and interact, I feel like that would be having that the social work experience is a blessing to you, to the creative process.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read from Emmy. Oh, she has a social work background. Yay, I'm always happy to meet social workers.
Nice.
We're rock stars in our own way. Let me see, I'm fascinated. My 10 books tend to be quiet. Being quiet. I remember there was a review of Daughters that said that my writing was childish. And I took it like I was like, okay, or maybe because, and then some people say, oh, it's not childish, it's accessible, it's the language. I found that it's that thing of you have to write what you want to write. They may not be popular, but which is fine, right? So I write for me first.
Right.
I would say that.
Thing.
So I'm not writing what's in right now. If I can't write something that's not a part of me in some sense. So I think I've come to acceptance with that.
Yeah. I can't see how someone would see writing as childish. I've only read A Good Name, but the perspectives, Zina's and Eziafa's perspectives are not childish. They're not experiencing childish things. So regardless of what the perception of the language is, the subject.
So I think I'm not using very complex words but the other party is I for years I've worked with children. And so the way I explain things in a way that you can understand. For me, what is more important is not the fanciness of the word, is it accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish? If I use all the fancy words and you don't understand what I'm saying, then it's pointless.
And then
right?
it is exactly as you said, inaccessible, and it
Yes.
excludes people, right? It
Yeah.
it excludes people from understanding the story and getting the message of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I that's how I write, and that's how I explain things, and that's how I walk through life. I don't use unnecessary words if I don't have to, like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So I think for me, yes, is it quiet? I'm very blessed to have agents who are just fantastic and who, root for my work, who support me. And I think that's it. It's finding, not everyone, people always say, oh, everybody loves pizza. I don't eat pizza because I don't eat cheese.
Right.
It's not for everybody still.
Yeah.
So your work won't be for everyone.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just come to, like, your own people will find you.
Yeah. That's why I don't understand book reviews. I've had this conversation a number of times with people, and I do not post book reviews if I didn't like the book. And mostly it's because my taste, my opinion shouldn't influence whether someone buys a book or not. You know what I mean? And so I don't, unless I'm posting a good review, I don't post. But I also, I don't hate many books. Yeah. Kaylee, do we have any, I know you said that there was one question that we missed, but I don't know if it was covered.
Yes, sorry, it took me longer than normal to get myself up on the screen. Yes, this is a question from David. And David says, you've published so many different types of writing, novels, novellas, short stories, kids' books. How do you choose whether an idea, or do you choose whether an idea becomes a novel, a short story, etc.?
I actually never sit down and say, okay, this one is going to be.
Right.
I don't think, that's interesting, because I don't think I've ever sat down. I think, so let me think, like with the children's books, when in 2016, I said, okay, you know what, I'm going to write a children's picture book. And I thought, okay, what was I going to write about? And I decided I was going to write about mental health or, disabilities. And for me, because when all my life, I've lived with anxiety, and I didn't know what it was. Right? I just knew that I was worried. I was like, I'm a huge worrier. Like, I worry about oh, what would happen tomorrow. And I remember as a child, I was always worried about something, but I didn't have a name for it. And so I said, okay. And that's what led me to writing There's an Elephant in My Wardrobe, because I wanted to talk about anxiety. And so that I thought it was just going to be a one-off. I was just going to have this big one picture book and I'll be done. And then when I wrote that one, I'm like, oh, maybe I should write another one. And then I said to write on anger management. And because anger and anxiety kind of like two faces of the same coin, because how you either you're internalizing or externalizing your feelings. And then I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to write about a little person. And so that was my third picture book. And so one thing I decided for my picture books, I was going to set them in Nigeria, because I wanted Nigerian children or African children or anyone in diaspora to be able to see themselves in the book. And especially in topics that we don't talk about. Those are still very much taboo topics. Like if we're talking about your mental health or talking about, and we don't talk about things like that. You're just meant to keep it to yourself. So I wanted another child like me growing up now to be able to say, oh, okay, there's something called anxiety. And it's not just in your head.
Right.
It is real, and you can get help for it. And you can talk to someone about it. And having language, and I've had even adults reach out to me that they enjoy the picture book. Because they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. This is what I'm feeling. And so so I don't really think about, for my poetry often tends to be, I'm trying to walk through something. They're more personal. I would say out of all my writing, my poetry tends to be more personal. And if it's something that it's really deep, then I write it in second person. That's my way of like kind of putting distance between me and it. And yeah, so I like in terms of my next step, I've been thinking, okay, I've walked through these 3 books. What's my next step? And what would I like to write on next? And so I usually come up with, maybe this is something I want to write about, and then I'll see how it unfolds. whether it comes out as a poem, and sometimes, so going back to Daughters Who Walk This Path started as a poem.
Right.
A crucial scene in that book was a poem that I published first. So it was called Silence Speaks. And so when I shared that poem on Facebook and people made disclosures to me of sexual abuse, and I was like, and these were people I didn't know.
Wow.
And so that was how that novel was sparked.
Right.
Before that poem, I did not know I could write a novel. So the entire novel manuscript came from a poem.
Right.
And it just kept growing. It was just like the poem was at the center, and it was just like sending out its tentacles, and it just kept growing and kept growing.
Yeah.
And it was written all around that poem. So yeah, so I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. In sitting down and writing one thing, that it can become something else entirely. Yeah. And I am so representation in children's books, especially picture books, needs to change dramatically. I feel like, and not just representation of kids of color and other cultures and whatever, but representation of complicated issues. You know, we have to move beyond believing that kids are too young to talk about anything, because they might be too young to talk about it, but they're thinking about it.
Yeah, and they live in it. So the book, so I lost both my parents within a year, so 2018 and 2019. So I just finished a picture book this year on grief.
Right.
And it's called When the Colors Went Away. That's what it's called.
Oh, wow.
Because that was how I felt, like the colors just went away. And that's something else that we don't, because children do experience grief. Children, and especially within this pandemic, where there has been just this global grief.
Yes.
You know, and so even given understanding that, yes, I think the way I always, even when I do some grief work with children, is I explain that it's like losing a body part. You're always going to feel it.
Yeah.
But then you learn how to use other body parts. You learn how to use other things. And then it doesn't mean that you forget. It doesn't mean that the people you love, you never think about them again. But then it's a new way of being. It's a new way of living life. And so that when I say that, you know, when I write, there has to be a part of me. There's something about me that I'm dealing with, that I'm curious about. In the things I write. So that was one thing that it was just like 900 words, but it was hard for me to write.
Right.
Because I could empathize with the character and with that grief of losing his parents.
Yeah. That's beautiful and sad and everything. I love that. I'm not sure if there are any more questions. I could talk to you for hours. I wanted to talk about I know we talked about the weight of the cultural thing, but I loved that there's a line about village gossip. and that everything you say or do is potentially going to be, you know, explained to everybody back home.
Yes.
But Yejide, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to raffle off 2 copies of A Good Name from Guernica. They are so generous. My most favorite, one of my most favorite, I can't say my most favorite because there's so many, favorite publishing house. And I'm excited for 2 people to win a copy of A Good Name. Kaylee, do you want to do the raffle?
Yes, so we've got our names in here. All right, our first winner is Vicky Hill.
Yay!
Yay, thank you.
Congrats,
I'm so excited to read it.
Vicky, I'm so excited. You have my personal email, which I'm happy for you to send me your mailing address to, or you can send it to junctionwrites@gmail.com.
Okay, sure. Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to read it.
That's awesome. I'm glad. I'm so glad that you won it. And the next winner.
Sorry, the next one is Emmy Nordstrom Higdon.
Yay!
Congrats, Emmy.
That's awesome. And Emmy, you can send me an email to junctionwrites@gmail.com, and you can include your mailing address. If you've already read it and you want to nominate, this goes for you, Vicky, too, and although I know you want to read it. If you've already read it and you want to nominate someone else, I can share a different name and address with Guernica, and they will send it out to whomever you would like to receive it.
No, I was just saying that Emmy said her library didn't have it. Emmy,
there you go.
You can tell the librarian that they could request it. Right, so somebody else. Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Oh,
she said I
good.
requested. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yejide, thank you so much for joining us. This was an incredible conversation. I could talk to you all night, I feel. For everyone else, please join us next week. It's our last reading of the season, and Frances Boyle, who's sitting up there, is going to talk to us about Seeking Shade, her incredible collection of short stories. And when you said second person, that's immediately what I thought, because the second story in the book is written in second person. And you can find us at junctionreads.ca. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Alton. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I had fun.
And thank you,
the
Kaylee.
time flew by.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye.